there, and welcome to Ancestral Recall. I'm your host, Eli Kaplan. Perhaps I might be the premier Magic YouTube historian. In this show, we're looking at the history of the game set by set, and today we're looking at one of the most powerful and controversial sets in the game's history, Darksteel. Darksteel is a sequel to Mirrodin and introduces two fascinating keywords, one that has managed to stand the test of time and get used repeatedly throughout multiple sets. Darksteel's powerful artifacts have warped numerous formats, and for better or for worse, the set's footprint is still felt today. Darksteel is the second set in Mirrodin block and tracks the continuation of the journey of Glissa Sunseeker, the Goblin Tinkerer Slowbad, and Bosch, a mysterious golem closely tied to the origin of the plane. This trio has traveled through the Lacuna in search of finding Memnarch, the entity at the heart of the world that oversees all from Panopticon. In the previous novel, Glissa decapitated Geth, a Nurok master of black mana that had managed to gain control of the Nim. His head refused to stop working, though, and offered Glissa a mix of secrets and treachery. She can't quite bring herself to get rid of that worm tongue, though. So let's talk about the namesake of the set. Darksteel is named after an indestructible metal, and fiction has these. The most famous is Marvel Universe's adamantium, the stuff that Wolverine's bones are made of. Nothing can break Darksteel. It's indestructible, although somehow people manage to shape it into things, and that's a classic paradox. How do you shape something that is indestructible? That should not work, but hey, it's magic. I'm okay with paradoxes. Other ways to be indestructible? Well, you can have the essence of the gods, such as the Myojin from Kamigawa block, or anything that is touched by that which was taken, and of course, Theros also has indestructible gods. So what exactly is indestructible? Indestructible permanents can't be destroyed by effects that say destroy blah blah blah. Creatures don't get put into the graveyard even though they were dealt lethal damage or hit by Wrath of God or Damnation. And to be clear, damage still gets inflicted on indestructible creatures. They just don't go to the graveyard. Reducing an indestructible creature's toughness to 0 will kill them though. Sacrifice effects also kill them. And not everything indestructible is a creature either. Artifacts and lands also get this treatment. It's not a big theme in the set. There are only 10 indestructible cards in Darksteel, but this is a signature effect. Without further ado, let's get to the cards. 90 are colored and 62 are artifacts, making the set somewhat less focused on artifacts than its predecessor. And this week we're going to talk about the colored cards. Next week, we'll finish with the mechanics and the artifacts. Why am I skipping modular, which is the other new mechanic? Well, because Darksteel's new mechanics only appeared on artifacts. Leonin Shikari never took off in Constructed, which is a shame, because I think it's one of the coolest cards to play when you're playing a deck with equipment, because you can equip and transfer equipment in the middle of combat. Forget sorcery speed. Now, if you can progress your board to the point in an equipment deck, this can turn combat into an unsolvable puzzle for your opponents. Now, Shikari could have been awesome in a less broken format. Pulse of the Fields is a representative of a cycle that did something with a resource, and if you had less of that thing than your opponent, it came back to your hand. Each pulse cost 3 mana, 1 CC. The red one, Pulse of the Forge, did 4 damage, and then came back to your hand sometimes. My personal favorite was Pulse of the Fields because in Affinity decks, their attack was so quick and so vicious, it would knock you down, but the Affinity would not like it when you gained 4 life. Pulse of the Fields often gave me 8 life over turns 3 and 4, keeping me alive just long enough to play Chroma's Vengeance against Affinity, and that was game. This cycle didn't make major waves in Constructed, though. Echoing Truth is the most played member of the Echoing cycle, and it's all about cards having the same name. These 2-mana instants destroy enchantments, bounce non-land permanents, give creatures -2/-2, destroy artifacts, or give creatures +2/+2. But if your opponent can remove the targeted creature from the equation, though, the echoing effect fizzles. Anyway, Echoing Truth is most known for dealing with tokens and copies in Modern and Eternal formats, but in limited formats, it was almost always played due to equipment. You know what Wizards did for the first time with Darksteel? An uncounterable counterspell. Last Word costs 4, and can't be countered by spells or abilities. There are other spells in Magic, such as Counterflux or cycling a Decree of Silence that replicates the same effect, but Last Word is the first truly uncounterable counterspell. You know what color gets mana, guys, right? Well, green would be the obvious answer. And sometimes today you might see it in red. But blue? Well, yeah, blue does get mana for artifacts, and it shows up for Darksteel with Vidalcan Engineer. This isn't a color pie violation, it's a different angle on affinity as a cost reduction on artifacts. And Engineer isn't that big a deal. Fate Reforged has a guy that's very similar. Death Cloud is a symmetrical removal spell. Now, the first spell of this sort, Ice Sage's Pox, force a player to sack a third of their hand, land, creatures, and life. But it was focusing on one person. A pox upon you. Ooh. Sounds Shakespearean, and it was brutal. Death Cloud takes the same types of cards, but makes the number simpler, making it BBBX. And the fact that the spell is legal in Modern terrifies me. It's symmetrical, yeah, I mean, it hurts the player who casts it, as well as all the other players in the games. But if it resolves, that board state is not going to be the same. And note that Death Cloud does not care about artifacts. Talismans get to stick around. Moxes, sure, why not? This is also a very close representation of Yawgmoth's corporeal form as he manifested at the end of Apocalypse on Dominaria. I like putting equipment in my cube, and I like having answers to it. Murderous Spoils may cost 6 mana, but it gets to swipe any equipment on the creature it destroys. That's mine now. That's not what people expect with equipment. And breaking up people's expectations is awesome. Dang it! My example of Entwine from the first Mirrodin episode, Barbed Lightning, showed up in this set, not actually in Mirrodin. But Barbed Lightning is a nice clean card with simple templating, and that's enough for me. Wizards has messed with the templating for Fireball many times. This Alpha Beta Unlimited Original is very complicated since it costs mana to assign additional targets separate from the key X number, which is divided equally. This was the final version that they set on, and this printing is the version that they've used in later reprints. Now, I feel the art on this Fireball looks far less spicy and meatball-like than the original, but yeah, it's pretty fiery. Oh well. Another precedent that Wizards did here and broke was taking some blue signature effects, in this case redirecting, and shifting it to another color with Shunt. This card is wacky, but it's very versatile, particularly in multiplayer. Here is another storyline character, Slowbad, Goblin Tinkerer. Slowbad could protect artifacts by sacrificing other artifacts? Yeah, well, it's a living. Slowbad didn't show up in many decks, sadly, except as a rare sideboard card. Last episode, I told you about the Tooth and Nail decks. Well, they immediately latched on to Reap and Sow, an Entwine spell that allowed you to destroy a land or search your library for a land and dump it into play. This spell, along with Sylvan Scrying, made getting a complete set of Urza's Tron lands a snap, and provided the fuel for playing the signature 9-mana spell. I even played a Talisman, or 8th edition's Vine Trellis, to start reaping on turn 3. Reap and Sow was also an absolute beating in the mirror match. Oxidize was the premium spot artifact removal set of the block, because, well, Oxidize costs 1 mana. And that was the key point that sold it on players who wanted to take down artifacts. And yet, in a format with a 1 mana disenchant and a 2 mana disenchant, Intelligent Law of Justice, this still wasn't enough to take down the critical mass that was Arcbound Ravager and Disciple of the Vault most of the time. Next time on Ancestral Recall, we'll examine the artifacts of the set and look at the overall score. Thanks for watching. This is Eli Kaplan for Ancestral Recall, signing off. Good games and good luck.